You're going to lose money this year. Electric vehicle maker Polestar cut its annual losses in half. It's ramping up production. Polestar is based in Sweden and plans to make 80,000 EVs this year. The results come as rivals Rivian, Nikola, and Lucid have reported supply chain and production problems. Tesla shares are lower this morning, down 5% in early trading after last night's big investor presentation that was short on details. Tesla says it will cut production costs in half. Fans of Apple TV Plus's Ted Lasso can buy biscuits with the boss flavored ice cream now at Jenny's. Jessica Ettinger, CNBC.
Are you the parent of a 2 to 7-year-old? Listen closely for an exciting free radio offer. By now, you've probably heard of ABC Mouse, the Parents' Choice Award-winning online learning program that's actually changing the lives of early learners everywhere.
ABC Mouse is like a little one-on-one teacher. It has helped her so much.
Right now, we're offering a special radio promo to try it free for a month, but you have to go to abcmouse.com/radio to claim your free month. That's abcmouse.com/radio.
Sponsored by Age of Learning.
Finding great candidates to hire can be like, well, trying to find a needle in a haystack, but not with ZipRecruiter. Its powerful technology actively finds and invites qualified candidates to apply to your job. So while other companies might deliver a lot of hay, ZipRecruiter finds you the needle in the haystack.
See why 4 out of 5 employers who post a job on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. Try ZipRecruiter for free at ZipRecruiter.com/free. That's ZipRecruiter.com/free.
Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here. Today on the big program, lots to get to, lots to talk about. Shocker of all shockers. I know you're going to be just mind blown. It's about the money. I know, right? Boom! It's always been about the money. And look, the bumper sticker for the ages. And thank you, Rupert Murdoch. It's not red or blue, it's green. Yeah. Hello. It's always been about the money. And this is one of those moments where you go, everything you see in front of you, all of the political theater of the F channels and all of the outrage candy shoved down your throat by right-wing talk radio, it's about the sale. It's about the money. It's getting you to part with your hard-earned money. It's getting regulators to cheat you out of better wages, hours, conditions. It's about getting lawmakers to ensure that there are no laws put in place that harm the profitability of corporate America that never trickles down to you. Yeah, that's what it's about. Shock. And could this be the moment where there's an awakening? Could this be that moment where people go, oh, that's what he's been talking about all these years. Oh, yeah, it's not about the red hats and the blue hats. It's about the hard hats. Now I'm starting to get it. Yeah, maybe. I'm hoping. And I'm hoping that we start paying better attention. And look, this isn't new, but I do have a new word for some. And I threw this out today, and someone was like, what is that? What is that magic that you speak of? Today's word, sophistry. Yes. And it's not a word that I've thought of in a long time. It's an old word. Let's say it's an old word. And it's defined as the use of fallacious arguments, especially with the intention of deceiving. A suitable, tricky, superficially plausible, but generally fallacious method of reasoning. A false argument. Again, it's always been about the money. Come back to this. Whether it was the quote attributed to Jay Gould that he could easily pay half the working class to murder the other half, or Marjorie Three Names and her orchestrated moment of outrage. It's always divide and conquer. And why? Why again? It's the green. It's the money. So when Marjorie Three Names tweeted this out with a video, she tweeted out, listen to this mother who lost 2 children to fentanyl poisoning tell the truth about both her son's murderers because of the Biden administration's refusal to secure our borders and stop the cartels from murdering Americans every day by Chinese fentanyl. And she had this poor woman, and my heart goes out to her, whose children both took this fentanyl, this Percocet laced with fentanyl is what it was. And they both died in July of 2020. Yeah, you heard me right. They died in July of 2020. This is the problem with our system. Because what Marjorie Three Names said is, Joe Biden did this. It was Joe Biden's fault. Joe Biden's the murderer here. To prove her point. Facts didn't bring that together. That's not the reality, because we know in July of 2020 there was a different president. Biden didn't take office until January 20th of 2021. But facts be damned. It's the narrative. It's all Joe Biden. It's all the Democrats, and we're gonna take these horribly painful, tragic situations, and we're gonna bring this woman in, and she's going to have to relive her pain on a national scale, just so Marjorie Three Names can point her finger, and so the Republicans can feel pure that they're fighting the good fight. Now, this is one of those moments where you go, totally dishonest. Why would I believe a word that comes out of a liar's mouth? My grandfather always said the last thing you want to be is a liar, cheat, or a thief. And sadly, the people that we keep putting on TV, the people we keep getting our quote-unquote news from, fit into some of those categories. And Marjorie Three Names being part of it. Now, President Biden did speak out. He said a little bit more Marjorie Taylor Greene, and we'll have a lot of Republicans running our way. She's amazing, he said. Is she amazing? Kind of being, she was saying that a poor mom lost 2 kids and that I killed her sons. It's interesting, since that fentanyl that they took came during the last administration. This is one of those moments where the extremism, the hatred, the ends justifying the means, puts us in a position to understand this is supposed to be a statesman. This is supposed to be a congresswoman with the utmost integrity, someone who has a team of researchers who, quite frankly, easily could have fixed this. But I tell you, they knew and didn't care. Because all you have to do is look at that channel. The F channel that's now in so much trouble, that brought us this wonderful quote. It's not about red or blue. It's about green. It's about what sells. It's about selling the outrage candy. And the outrage candy is what it is. Look, she's not alone. It's not just Marjorie Three Names. I look at James Comer, Republican from Kentucky, who is the chair of the House Oversight and Accountability Committee. One of the most powerful positions in our entire government. He was on some right-wing podcast blathering on about how the U.S. attorney should have gone after Beau Biden. It's not bad enough they're going after Hunter. Let's go after Joe Biden's dead son now. I mean, this is how crazy these folks have gotten. And look, I hope Biden's right. I hope this is far off the beaten path as the Republicans get, that the sane, rational Republicans, voters who may be still out there, do run. I don't see it, though. I'm just not seeing it because the money keeps flowing. I look at, and this is one of these moments where, again, facts, history, reality, none of that matters. It's about selling the product. And the product is outrage. The product is anger. The product is division. I can easily pay half the working class to murder the other half. Divide and conquer. And why? It's not about red or blue. It's about green. It's about the money. It's about the power, the control. Marjorie Three Names was on the F channel last night with Hannity. going on about the national divorce. And I'm sure you've heard of this. And of course, it's not calling for a civil war. No. We just want red states and blue states, and we want them to be completely divided. And again, how you want to break up the country? Yes. Yeah, that's what you. But I loved her quote. We're fed up with Democrat policies. We're fed up with the woke ideology being shoved down our throats, and we're tired of our children being brainwashed into these same ideas. We want our own safe space, and we deserve it. And I'm going, wait a second. Weren't you the same people who, when black students said, we want a safe space where we can, we can be ourselves, you mocked them as snowflakes? Do I forget this? Is it that I don't have the American amnesia? Maybe I haven't taken enough of the red pill or blue pill. It's quite remarkable. Now, what Marjorie Three Names is really praying for is what they want. They want white America. They want to be able to divide up the country and send the others away and force others away. And what's interesting, what she's talking about, and again, this is where, that public school education of mine, damn that public education. I remember learning about the Articles of Confederation, I think in 9th grade, was it? And how weak this system of governance was, which is why we ended up getting a constitution that they claim they love. Now remember, they claim to love the Constitution. In fact, they carry it with them. It's part of their apparel. It's what they love. That came out of how weak the Articles of Confederation were. What they really want is they want to be able to have mob rule, and they want to have zealotry rule the day, and intolerance and hatred be normal. This is one of those things of, and this is I love the I don't know where I saw the quote, but I love the line. We're going to be more racist because you won't let us be racist. We're going to be more hateful because you won't let us be hateful. This is who they are. And it comes out in all the things that they keep throwing at us, all of the insane legislation, and we'll talk about some of this throughout the day. But this is kind of frightening in a sense. The hope is that there's going to be an epiphany, that we have that moment of clarity where we go, the music plays, I now see the light. Like the Blues Brothers, I see the light. Maybe, I'm hoping, and maybe it's Rupert Murdoch. It's not red or blue. It's green. It's about the money. Their ideology is total bunk. Let's use that word. You know what I meant, though. Their ideology is simply about more for them and less for working people. And I say this all the time. Republicans hate working people. Look at their policies. Look at what they do. Look at how they divide and for who. And for me, at the end of this, it comes down to some simple stuff. We better wake up, because the country that we're going to end up with is going to be a very ugly, very hateful, very zealot-filled, rigid kind of place. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Got so much to get to. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, email me, rick at thericksmithshow.com. Interesting little bit. Evidently, Trump is leading DeSantis. DeSantis has slid in the polling a little bit. And this is one of those things where you got, DeSantis had been leading Trump 45-41. Now Trump leads 47-39. And look, Trump's going to cause a lot of problems for the Republicans because he's all over the place. I think day before yesterday, he called for universal tariffs, something that I'll tell you, I'm not opposed to. The idea that, I've always been a big supporter of domestic production for domestic consumption. We need to make things, build things, consume things here at home. And he's calling for this. He's calling for an end to most favored nation status for China. This I'm thrilled with. Republicans not happy. Not happy at all. The party of big business not thrilled because there's a lot of their wealth tied up there. Not to mention, and this is where Trump's going to get himself into some trouble, because the farmer folk know where their bread's buttered. It's in exports to places like China, where China is one of the largest exporters or importers of food on this planet. If we stopped exporting food to China, I saw a guy who said, within a year, he said like 500 million people would starve. And you go, wow. So this is the money maker. And you've got a lot of rural Republicans who are pushing back against this idea, going, no, that's bad. That's our pocketbook. That's our money. Again, it's not red or blue. It's green. It's all about the money. So I find it interesting. Now, again, one of those states that would be hurt by it, Iowa. And you remember we had talked about Iowa's food stamp bill. They were going through their SNAP legislation, and just the insanity that came up. Can't have flavored yogurts, and you can only have wheat bread, no white bread for you, because that's for people with actual jobs, or who have jobs that pay enough. It was really just the people sat down and thought this thing through. It was about denying people, I guess, just basic dignity. And my mind goes to this place of, if we got all this food for export, you don't think we could feed people here? We've got childhood hunger right here. We got a president who said in the next 7 years, we're going to end childhood hunger. This should be a national call to action. The problem is our producers see bigger profits elsewhere. There's no real profit in feeding poor children. Here, we get over there profits to be made. And I look at today. Today is Republican We Love Poor Children Day. Today is the day that the additional money for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, the SNAP benefits, ends. This is the day that, because of the COVID bills, the American Rescue Plan, and all of that, there was money put into increasing the benefit, the SNAP benefit, and making more people eligible. What we're going to see across the board is more people losing their SNAP benefits and losing portions of it. And what it was you're talking, small amounts of money. I saw that it was like $95 a month, and that's going to be taken away. And for a state like Iowa, and this is the weird thing for me, what we know, for every SNAP dollar spent, every SNAP dollar we send out the door in economic activity locally, it's like $1.80. So the reverberation effect in the local economy is fantastic. You want to talk about helping grow an economy, feeding people is a great way to do it. But according to the reports, now you're going to have the average household is going to lose $90 a month. And you go, well, that's it's only $6 a day. It's not that much. It's only, it's not that much. Only $90. And you go, yeah, it's only $90. And what's going to happen next month, 3 months down the road, is you're going to see the food insecurity rates go through the roof. Hunger. When I was a kid, it was hunger. Now it's food insecure. And food banks are going to, again, be at wit's end. We're going to have all of this struggle going on because, again, we can't help those poor people. No, can't do that. That's bad. And the thing that gets me is the one thing that the pandemic has shown us is how little it takes to get people out of poverty and help them lead better lives. I mean, we're not talking thousands of dollars a month. When at one point where we were giving $250 per kid over the age of 6 and $300 for under the age of 6 to help feed the kids, childhood poverty cut in half. This SNAP benefit that you gave to help feed people reduced poverty by an enormous amount. And yet, what you got is you got my Republican friends, and I get this from folks who listen to Outrage Radio. Well, we're going to make them hungry, and they're going to have to go to job, and they're going to work. And the weird thing is, and this is really the twisted, weird, bizarre thing in this, a majority of the people who get food stamps, who get the SNAP benefits, have freaking jobs. Ask that cashier at Walmart. Ask those low-wage workers who are making just minimum wage or just above. Ask them how they put food on the table. And one of the things we've done in this country, and again, it's because, one, we've allowed the labor movement to be weakened, and two, we've got a really divided country. We're willing to let people go hungry in the wealthiest country in the history of civilization at its wealthiest moment. And that's twisted and bizarre to me. And there's no political penalty for this, because Republicans do a great job of messaging on this. If you're getting food stamps, you must be lazy. You must not be working. And the reality is, a lot of the folks at the bottom, especially families, they're the ones who are collecting. Those are the ones who need the help. They're the ones who need the school lunch programs. And my friend Sammy Sheets, state representative out in Iowa, he, in a bipartisan way, and good on them, have gone and are moving a piece of legislation to help end this idiocy on school lunch programs. I mean, seriously, this is who we are. And again, we talk about budgets being moral documents and these financial decisions being morality. Remember, the party of pro-life, the party of we love the babies, we love me some children. These are the people who are the ones who are demanding that we cut these programs. Now, I go back to when I was a kid. Look, I'll be quite frank. Clown money food stamps when I was a kid was humiliating. My mother, a single parent, and I were on it, on and off as a single mother. The 1970s were not a good period for single women with children. Always the last hired, first fired. It was a bad time. And we were on it, and I hated every minute of it, and she hated it even more. It was degrading. It was humiliating. It was all of those things. And I've always been against handout programs. But there is no better alternative to end hunger in this country than ensuring that people have the ability to buy food. And if we're not going to create a program that's going to ensure that people can get high-paying, good-paying, family-sustaining wage jobs so that they can put food on the table, this is the only other alternative at this moment. When we come up with a better one, I will be in favor of that. But for this moment, this is an economic generator of epic proportions. This is a way to kill a bunch of birds with one stone. This is about feeding children, families, safety net, economic activity, helping farmers. We love that. But again, we've got my Republican friends who hate working people, hell-bent on, we got to get them people desperate enough, hungry enough to go back and work for poverty wages in desperate conditions if they're not already in those desperate conditions. Now, the question is going to become at this moment, how is this going to hurt state budgets? How many states are going to fill that funding gap? How many states are going to try and figure out a way to ensure that, the problems that are going to come are dealt with? We know the red states that Marjorie and her clan want to splinter off, they're going to suffer. The question is how do we ensure that that suffering doesn't get worse? And that's one of those things we vote over. Just my thoughts. Want to hear yours? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. You miss any portion of the program? Make sure you grab the podcast. Wherever you find your favorite podcasts, you'll find ours. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1936. That was the day Hoover Dam was formally turned over to the federal government. It was a massive undertaking. Approved by the Coolidge administration in 1928, work began to divert and then dam the Colorado River in 1931, creating Lake Mead. Thousands of unemployed flocked to the area in search of jobs. More than 21,000 were employed over the course of 5 years, with as many as 5,200 working on any given day. Workers were paid on average of 50 cents an hour, with higher pay for skilled work. Governmental hiring terms included preference to veterans and no hiring of Asians. The Colored Citizens Labor and Protective Association of Las Vegas protested de facto hiring discrimination against blacks. Their eventual representation among the employed totaled an estimated 24 to 30 for the duration of the project. A few Native Americans were hired as high scalers to remove loose rock with jackhammers and dynamite. Estimated fatalities ranged from 96 to over 150. Many died from falls, heat-related illnesses, falling debris, heavy equipment, and carbon monoxide poisoning from tunnel work. The project was rocked by at least 2 documented strikes. The industrial workers of the world attempted to organize there. Workers struck over wage cuts and working conditions. They repeatedly demanded flushing toilets and cold, clean running water, especially in temperatures as high as 120 degrees in the summertime. At the time the Hoover Dam was turned over to the federal government, it was the tallest dam and the largest hydroelectric station in the country. It currently generates about 4 billion kilowatt hours of hydroelectric power for Nevada, Arizona, and California. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Stuff happens, right? I mean, who could have thought that in these modern times of digital monitoring of everything, something as massive as a freight train could become a toxic fireball rolling undetected and unslowed into an Ohio town? But a Norfolk Southern train did just that, derailing in East Palestine and contaminating the air, water, land, and families with tons of cancer-causing chemicals. Gosh, exclaimed Norfolk Southern. Gosh, exclaimed the Ohio governor. Gosh, exclaimed the U.S. Transportation Chief. Gosh, exclaimed the GOP chair of the Rail Transportation Committee. This is a terrible, unexpected accident, and we're all appalled by it. Only, all of these officials knew full well that this disaster would happen, though they didn't know exactly where. Indeed, far from unexpected, there are more than 1,000 preventable train derailments in the U.S. every year. Norfolk Southern had another one only days after the one in Ohio. And these things don't just happen. They're caused by the profiteering greed of the monopolistic industry's top executives and rich investors. While Norfolk's boardroom elites have been pocketing record profits in recent years, they've used armies of lobbyists and multi-million-dollar political donations to kill safety protections that would prevent such a disastrous record. To cut costs and jack up profits, railroad bosses have rigged the rules to run trains that are absurdly long, go too fast, carry undisclosed toxics in weak tanker cars, have no fire detectors, use outmoded braking systems, and have as few as 1 crew member on board. 1. This is Jim Hightower saying Norfolk's derailed train was made to derail. It pulled 149 cars stretching nearly 2 miles down the track, and it was ill-equipped to detect fires and other problems. This disaster was not an accident. It was mandated by the corporate and government officials now professing outrage.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I've said for years, and this is not nothing that you haven't already heard, our labor laws are so outdated that anyone consulting for these companies where their employees want to unionize, they want to exercise their right to organize. If you're a consultant, it would actually be malpractice if you didn't tell those employers to fire the most vocal person. Because look, the reality is the penalties are pathetic. And yet here is another in a long, long line of examples. 3 years after being fired, 2 Philadelphia Starbucks workers are getting their jobs back. Now you've got 7, I guess, from Starbucks in Buffalo getting their jobs back. And what's the punishment? Yeah, they're going to get reinstated. They're going to get made whole, which means whatever they would have earned at Starbucks, they'll get that pay, minus whatever they earned in the interim. And the dreaded, we won't do it again until we do it again. This is why we need major comprehensive labor law reform. And here to share some thoughts on maybe just how bad it is, and if maybe I'm just being too jaded and pessimistic. And here to share some thoughts on if this is a huge win. I've asked my good friend Steve Greenhouse to come talk with us. Steve is a labor journalist, author of numerous books, including the most recent one, Beaten Down, Worked Up: The Past, Present, and Future of American Labor. Stephen, thanks for taking time for us.
Good to be on with a good friend of labor, Rick.
I'm looking at this. I'm looking at this story of you've got the Starbucks workers in Philadelphia, the Starbucks workers in Buffalo. They've got their jobs back. The NLRB has come out with this decision that's really scathing. Does it matter?
It matters somewhat. I mean, I think there's so backing up. So. We saw this, inspiring wave of unionization over the past year. Starbucks, Amazon, REI, Chipotle, even Apple. Whoever thought Apple would unionize? And now a Potbelly sandwich shop in Oregon, they're trying to unionize. So there's a lot of excitement, and I've been around a long time, and there's more excitement for unions now than any time in my lifetime. But Rick, we're seeing this humongous, ferocious pushback by corporations, by Starbucks and Amazon, and many, the NLRB keeps accusing these companies of violating the law to crack down on unions. Some judges have followed up by saying, yes, you're right. This judge's decision today about Buffalo said that Starbucks was engaged in egregious and widespread violations of the law, ordering the reinstatement of 7 workers, ordering reimbursement of 27 workers who were punished improperly, ordering Starbucks to reopen some stores in Buffalo. That's a big deal. That's rare. So I think, so you asked me, does this make a difference? I think the case is building against Starbucks about how, I'll use the word, notorious a lawbreaker is. And Bernie Sanders is saying, we want Howard Schultz in the Senate next, to come and face the music.
Right.
So I think, all this kind of is helping maybe turn the tide to put more pressure on Starbucks. And we had this weird thing last week where a federal judge issued an extraordinary cease and desist order against Starbucks saying, thou shalt not break the law, thou shalt stop firing all these workers for supporting a union. And then mysteriously, the judge reversed himself the next day. And people were so happy when he issued this order. But I think, again, with decisions in the Philadelphia case you just mentioned and the Buffalo case, I think, the evidence is building for a judge to issue a cease and desist order saying, Starbucks, you've been found so often to have illegally fired workers for supporting a union, and yet you continue to do so. So we need a nationwide order to stop it. So I think the momentum's building. Having said that, I agree fully with you, Rick, that the punishment doesn't fit the crime. I think we're seeing, there have been studies showing that basically 1 in 5 rank and file leaders leading a unionization effort at their company gets fired. And there's really no disincentive for companies not to fire these people because they can't be fined, because, as you say, the law is so toothless, the penalties are so paltry. And in my book, Beaten Down, Worked Up, I wrote about a nursing home worker who was fired for supposedly trying to strangle a nurse. It took 6 years of litigation for federal judges to rule that that is total BS. That story that he tried to strangle a nurse is poppycock. And you think maybe nursing home would be fined $200, $300, $400, $5,000, pay years of back pay. You only have to pay $1,500 in back pay because the guy found another job and he didn't lose much money from getting fired. So, without any fines, often with very little back pay, they're really, I think businesses are told by their $1,000 an hour lawyers, anti-union lawyers, it's probably not so bad to break the law and fire these people because that will help cripple the unionization effort.
No, look, I did organizing years ago, and this is before all of the excitement, and that was the MO back then. They would fire the most vocal organizer, and it would send a chilling effect across the entire unit, and you ended up losing that because, well, the most vocal, most pro-union person was out of the picture. And then, you'd fight for a year, 2, 3 down the road to get them their jobs back, which they ever took back because they found something somewhere else. There was no monetary penalty, but the company, they had to post that dreaded, we won't do it again until next time letter.
So what was one of the unusual and good things about the judge's decision today involving Buffalo is that he said that Howard Schultz himself would either have to speak to the Buffalo workers or do a video kind of apologizing and explaining, read this 14-page letter about how Starbucks egregiously broke the law. I imagine that Starbucks is going to appeal this up to the 5-person NLRB, and if the 5-person NLRB upholds the judge's opinion, then it will go to the Federal Court of Appeals and maybe the Supreme Court, and maybe in 15 years, if you and I are still alive, Rick, they'll settle this. So it's really, really hard. One of the great things about that almost cease and desist order is, like, if a judge does issue a nationwide cease and desist against Starbucks, and then Starbucks continues to illegally fire them, then you could fine the hell out of them, for being in contempt of court. And then that, even though the National Labor Relations Act doesn't have any real teeth to fine a company, if they can face contempt for breaking a cease and desist order, then that might make a difference.
See, is there no point in our labor law where you go, you know what, you've been so bad at this, you've broken so many laws, you've done so many egregious things that we're going to impose a contract on you, and there's nothing you can do about it other than sit down and take your medicine?
Your dream? No. I mean, so I just wrote this lengthy story for the Guardian newspaper saying, we've had these huge union successes, remarkable victories over the past, since December 21, when the Starbucks workers first won in Buffalo, and they won at Amazon on April 1st, and they won at REI, and they won at Chipotle in August, and they won at Apple, and these are big deals. But at none of these companies have the workers gotten their first contract. And I interviewed all these, experts, who said even if companies are found to be deliberately dragging their feet, even if they're deliberately acting in bad faith, and the NLRB and federal judges rule that the companies are breaking the law, you still can't require them to reach a contract. You can't require them to make any concessions. So it becomes like a cat chasing its tail, trying to get the companies to really reach a contract. And that is a big problem. And Joe Biden was pushing for this Protecting the Right to Organize Act, this pro-labor legislation, and Bernie Sanders just reintroduced it the other day. And this legislation would do many important things, but two of them would be, it would, if a union wins and after 120 days they still haven't reached a contract, you appoint an arbitrator to basically rule this should be the contract. So instead of workers waiting 2, 3, 4 years to get a first contract, boom, they have a first contract. And I think companies like Starbucks and Amazon realize, if we could drag out ever reaching a first contract for 1 year or 2 years or more, that's really, really going to discourage and deter, workers at non-union Amazons and non-union Starbucks to, like, why should I even bother to unionize? And the other thing about the PRO Act is it would, for the first time, allow the National Labor Relations Board to impose real substantial 5-digit, 6-digit fines against companies that break the law by, for instance, firing pro-union workers.
Yeah, I'm all in favor of the PRO Act, just like I was in favor of the incremental move forward that the Employee Free Choice Act would have gotten us during the Bush years. We've been talking about this stuff for decades now, and yet we've gotten no further because, as you pointed out, corporate America knows all they've got to do is play out the clock. They got to delay this stuff out and push it off because the next administration might not be as friendly for workers.
This is true. I mean, we have the problem of, so nowadays, what, 70% of the public uh, approve of a union, the highest approve of unions, the highest number since 1965, and in 57, 58 years. That's a long time. Uh, 1 in 2 non-union workers say they'd vote to join a union if they could. Basically, 3 in 4 young workers say they'd vote to join a union if they could. People want a union, and they want it to be easier to unionize. But when you try to pass a law that would make it easier to unionize, people from a certain party that receive, especially the Republican Party, receive a ton of donations from corporations. They're not going to vote to approve the PRO Act or any other legislation that would make it easier to unionize. So it's really hard for labor. I remember Rich Trumka said, there's a real conundrum for the nation's workers. Like, for unions to grow stronger, we need Congress to pass legislation, but Congress won't pass legislation unless unions are stronger to pressure them to do it. So we're caught, and it seems that corporate power, even though there's such a surge of enthusiasm about unions right now, corporate power keeps growing and growing, and billion-dollar donations from billionaire groups like the Koch brothers network really have a lot of lawmakers, especially Republican lawmakers, dancing to their tune, and they'll vote against anything that would help unions.
Yeah. Let me ask you this though. I mean, because you go back to before the Depression, the 20s and 30s. There were people who were militant. I mean, you had a much more militant movement of people who weren't in unions, who were fighting the fight. And there are people now who think the National Labor Relations Board and the National Labor Relations Act are outdated and not useful, and that we just need to be building worker power outside of this, because all of this stuff, we're winning elections, we're just getting anywhere. What do you say to that idea that maybe we need to just scrap this and move in a different direction?
So I think the National Labor Relations Act helps in some ways. The Starbucks workers, have unionized at 280 Starbucks. That's good. I think without all the illegalities by Starbucks, we might have seen workers at 1,000 Starbucks unionized by now. And you're absolutely right, Rick. Many workers were very, very militant in the 1920s and 30s, and they got some results without the National Labor Relations Act, and all their militancy scared a lot of companies. If we got rid of the National Labor Relations Act, I think Americans just aren't militant in the same way as people in the 1920s and 30s were. I could be workers at least aren't. I think the Proud Boys, unfortunately, are very militant, the Oath Keepers, but that's a whole other thing. So I think the important thing isn't to scrap the National Labor Relations Act; it's somehow to strengthen it. And a big debate right now is, Rick, is some people saying, with Congress, so divided, and with the filibuster, it's nearly impossible to strengthen the National Labor Relations Act. So instead, let's somehow find a way to give the blue states more latitude to make it easier for workers to unionize. But that's hard because generally labor relations laws of unionization are done at the federal level, and you have to find a way to prevent federal rules from preempting the states from doing these things. And, a good example, so California passed this new law to protect fast food workers, and the unions and the government and business would appoint this council of 13, 14 members that would make recommendations on improving fast food workers' jobs, on raising their pay. That would make legislations to the legislature. It's sort of a means of collective bargaining, Rick, but it's different. But I think it could be allowed and not be so-called preempted or overruled by federal law. So there's a greater effort to do more on the state level that way.
No, this is going to be an interesting year because there is so much excitement. There's so many big fights coming up. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Stephen Greenhouse, labor journalist and author of the book Beaten Down, Worked Up, the Past, Present, and Future of American Labor. We'll get links out on social media. You can take a look at this. But this is going to be an interesting summer because you've got some pretty big labor fights coming up. You've got the Teamsters, negotiating a contract with UPS. You've got the UAW and the auto industry. There's a lot of that, plus all of this organizing going on. So this is kind of going to be like a labor summer, if you will.
Yes, and there's this big labor spring going on that many universities around the country, with all the organizing of grad students and adjunct faculty and some full-time faculty, there are going to be all these teach-ins. So there's something called a labor spring. Is being, folks out of Georgetown are the big sponsors. Then I think you're right. There's going to be a very hot labor summer. There really could be a strike by more than 300,000 workers at UPS. And, UPS is trying to, crack down and save money because it's facing intense lower wage competition from FedEx and Amazon. And they say kind of understandably, hey, Teamsters, we love you, but we got to be more competitive. So we got to, cut costs here and there. And Sean O'Brien, the new president of the Teamsters, is saying, we're tired of concessions. We're tired of being pushed around. And someone who's newly elected president of a union often wants to show his mettle, show their mettle, flex their muscles. So it might be a real fight between this powerful company that says we need to cut costs to remain competitive and this powerful union who says we're not going to swallow any concessions anymore. So it could be a very hot summer.
It's going to be interesting. And as someone who's been a Teamster for over 30 years, it's something I'm watching very closely because a lot of my Teamsters brothers at UPS are saying, the money's one thing, but it's the treatment. It's the constant monitoring. It's the constant harassment. That's the real issue that I hear from most UPS people that I know. So
and now they increase, and I just wrote this big problem about the increasing problem of high heat for workers, and not just farm workers, not just construction workers, but UPS drivers. They complain that their trucks aren't air conditioned, and what's it like making UPS deliveries in Texas or Arizona or Louisiana in July and August. So that's also a hot issue. No pun intended.
But again, it's going to be a very interesting summer. It's one I'm sure that you're going to be on top of, and I hope you'll come back and share some more thoughts. Hope folks will take a look at your book, Beaten Down and Worked Up. Also, the most recent article you got out, Old School Union Busting, how U.S. corporations are quashing the new wave of organizing over at The Guardian. We'll get links out. Stephen, I appreciate the time.
Okay, always good to talk. Be well. Keep it up. Keep up the good work.
Thanks so much, Stephen Greenhouse. Again, make sure you check out the book. Gonna take a quick break. Right back with your thoughts. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1900. That was the day the members of the Granite Cutters National Union walked out on strike. Their demands were improved wages and the 8-hour day. The leader of the strike was James Duncan, a Scottish granite cutter. Duncan had been elected Granite Cutter President in 1885. He was one of the founders of the American Federation of Labor. He served on the AFL's executive committee and was a close personal advisor of AFL President Samuel Gompers. Most of the granite cutters were located in cities on the East Coast. The union's first local was founded in Maine in 1877. Like many skilled trade unions of its day, under Duncan's leadership, the organization did not welcome black members. Duncan actively encouraged employers in the South to hire only white granite cutters. The strike of 1900 lasted until mid-May. It ended with a victory for the union, including the 8-hour workday for every local of granite cutters. Because their skills were often in high demand, tradecraft unions were sometimes able to win concessions from employers on matters of wages, hours, and working conditions. These victories by skilled craftsmen helped pave the way for the 8-hour workday to become the standard workday for all working people in the United States. The union also won a minimum wage standard and grievance procedure. In 1905, the Granite Cutters changed their name to the Granite Cutters International Union. During the 20th century, changes in technology changed the labor of granite cutting. Machines reduced the number of workers. In the 1920s, the union had more than 10,000 members. But by the late 1970s, it had dropped to less than 4,000 members. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
So Mike Pence did an interview with CBS News, which I found very interesting. He said that he's not going to commit to supporting Donald Trump. He says he thinks different times calls for different leadership. I'm going, wait a second, hold on. This is the guy who put you out to get murdered, and you're going to say, oh, I think different times call for different leadership. Wow, I mean, and I thought Ted Cruz was bad. I thought Ted Cruz was bad, kissing Trump's behind after Trump called his wife ugly. I thought he was bad. This guy was going to get hung. They locked him out of the building. Wow. Look, I guess it is all about the politics, isn't it? Speaking about all about the politics, I'm sure you saw the story. Eli Lilly today announced that they are going to be capping the price of insulin at $35 a month for everyone. People with private insurance, people with no insurance, everyone gets insulin, $35 a month. It's interesting. And this is, when I saw this, I go, I think it's interesting when the CEO of a company gets a subpoena to testify in front of Bernie Sanders, that amazingly that they decide to do, I don't know, the right thing. Now, understand, this isn't the benevolence of Eli Lilly. They're not having a good heart. They haven't seen the light. There's no epiphany here. This is purely a strategic decision because insulin is the hotbed drug right now. This is them going, we're going to voluntarily do it. We don't need you to pass legislation. No, don't do that. No, that would be bad, because then maybe you'll go looking at all of the other drugs that we're gouging consumers for. Maybe we'll start looking at every other drug that we're charging, 300, 400 times, what it should cost, what we charge other countries, especially Medicare and Medicaid. This is one of the, again, no benevolence here, no benevolence here. But I do find it interesting, which for me, again, this is one of those moments, been saying it for a long time, saying it for years now, where maybe Bernie's going to be my Harry Truman. Maybe Bernie's my Truman. Start calling these war profiteers in, start calling these pandemic profiteers in, start putting them in the hot seat. You'll start seeing prices come down. You'll start seeing it. Today also, again, this is one of those moments where I'm torn because Republicans put forth this Data Act, H.R. 1153, that would ban TikTok from all cell phones. I think TikTok is a horrible. I think the fact that the Chinese Communist government has a direct line into our kids is a horrible thing. They've banned TikTok on all government phones, and the logic goes, look, if we banned it on government phones, if it's so bad that the government workers can't have it, why should our kids have it? I kind of agree with that. But here Republicans have moved this forward. All of the Republicans voted for it. All the Democrats voted against it. And you go, this is how this is going to work, so get ready for the messaging. Democrats want your kids to be controlled by the Chinese Communist government. And that is not at all reality. What the Democrats are saying here is they want to slow things down. They want to have the organization that is generally in charge of this, the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, the CFIUS, they want them to move this forward and to do what they do first. And then down the road, now me personally, I say you ban the damn thing. And the same thing with when Trump allowed Huawei to continue to sell here in the U.S. We've got to start decoupling from the Chinese having such control of our communications and our infrastructure. That has got to happen, and it's got to happen quickly. And this is a moment. This could be a bipartisan, nonpartisan moment where the reality is they've got control of our farmlands, not a lot of it, but they have some of it. They've got control of our manufacturing capacities. They're possibly going to take over Taiwan at some point and have control of how to make semiconductors that we desperately need. This is where the U.S. has got to lift its head up and go, that greed thing, the money thing, the green thing. Maybe we got to start looking at the you and me thing. Enough with the billionaires and the wealthy lining their pockets. It's about the rest of us. So I think Democrats made a mistake here on this legislation, and we're going to talk about this going forward because clearly there's going to be more like this. But I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Should Dems gone along, and would this have put Biden in a hot seat? Could be part of that as well. I want to hear your thoughts. rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back.
This wild weather.
It's absolutely crazy.
What a wild sort of, bizarro thing to happen this time of year.
It is bizarro.
Bizarro weather whiplash as winter gets warmer and weirder in the U.S.
What's going to happen 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now?
Rising concerns about the long-term impact of the Ohio chemical train derailment. Plus,
maybe the regulation needs to be there. I think there needs to be, there's a widespread sentiment to have a look at the whole rail industry, what the lobbyists are doing.
Fox News discovers that regulations protect the public.
All of those discoveries and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
East Palestine, Ohio got visits from both Donald Trump and Pete Buttigieg, but some Fox personalities insisted that others really should have been there too.
Think about the environmental activists and corporate America. They weren't there. I mean, with the activists, this is an Aaron Brockovich moment. I mean, there was a blockbuster Oscar-winning movie written about something like this.
Aaron Brockovich is actually in East Palestine tonight, right now.
She is, but where's Julia Roberts?
What?
What indeed? This is your Green News Report.
You realize Julia Roberts is an actor, right? She's not actually Erin Brockovich. What the is wrong with you?
Okay, Desi Doyen, before we get to Ohio, just a quick question. What the hell is going on with the weather across the entire country?
Yes, it is definitely weird. Weather whiplash hit across the U.S. over the weekend after an epic storm brought heavy snow, ice, and rain from the west coast across the northern half of the country. It even included an extremely rare blizzard warning for Los Angeles.
On the upside, the mountains and foothills were beautiful out here in Los Angeles on Sunday, covered with snowfall.
The cold, snow, and ice in the north was in sharp contrast to simultaneous record-breaking hot February temperatures in the east and southeast, with temperatures hitting in the 80s. It hit 102 degrees in Falcon Lake, Texas, one of the hottest temperatures ever recorded in the lower 48 so early in the year. Then the same storm system generated at least 9 tornadoes and destructive winds across the southern plains on Monday, knocking out power and killing at least one person in Oklahoma. If confirmed, the outbreak would set a record for the most tornadoes ever recorded in the month of February.
We have so broken our climate.
Climate change is making winter weather warmer and weirder.
I knew it.
That's according to a new analysis by climate data firm Climate Central, which found that winter in the U.S. is warming up, particularly in the Northeast and upper Midwest, where winter temperatures have warmed 5 to 7 degrees Fahrenheit since the 1980s. Climate scientists say more heat energy in the system is intensifying extreme weather events. It's also playing havoc with crops that require persistent cold temperatures like apples, cherries, and blueberries.
Oh, I'm sure it'll be fine.
In Europe, an unusually warm, precipitation-free winter has deepened an ongoing historic drought. Lack of snow in the Alps is hammering winter tourism revenue and raising concerns for drought in the spring. Little to no snowpack to feed rivers, streams, and reservoirs throughout the spring is a major concern now for farmers planting crops and for shipping, as Europe's rivers continue to run at or near historic lows. Here in the U.S., in the ongoing toxic chemical train derailment disaster in East Palestine, Ohio, officials still say that tests of air and water remain below.
KCAA Loma Linda.